bringing you in-depth discussion from one of the rad groups of online writers covering the Edmonton Oilers. Are you ready for Oilers Overtime? Join us as we talk news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and more. All featured on one of the most glorified teams in the NHL. From the great one to the next one. From the boys on the bus to the decade of darkness. This is Oilers Overtime.
Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. I'm here with the regular cast of characters, and boy, did we catch this thing at the right time. We were trying to figure out how to record our, I don't know, you call this audio podcast, video, what have you, the other day, and then the Oilers had back-to-back games against the Vegas Golden Knights, Chicago Blackhawks, and we're like, maybe we can't really do this. And then we waited and we said, well, we'll do something on Thursday. And of course, Thursday morning at 9 a.m. around our time here, Mountain Time, Dave Tippett is fired. So now we have all sorts of content to talk about, and we've got everybody on, including Colton Panku. Colton, how are you?
I'm good, Jim. Like you said, we finally are putting out a podcast after big news. It seems like it's usually the other way around. So
that's right. We should be able to blow through and breeze through this half an hour or so very, very quickly. Brian Swain is with us too. Brian, how are you?
And I'm tired. I'm not gonna lie.
Tired because you're trying to cover everything, or tired just because you're tired of the way
I don't
playing,
know.
or what?
Yeah, I think it's all part of it. But yeah, this has been an absolutely crazy day. I know we'll get into the news, but I was very surprised when it came down, to be honest. Like, I was not expecting this today. So
okay, well, I'm coming back to you first then, because I want to know what you're thinking there. And of course, Julian Mangila's with us. Julian, how are you doing?
I'm good. My mind's in a pretzel, but there's a lot to dissect, so let's just dive right into it quick.
Okay, well, let's talk about the Dave Tippett firing. So, Brian, why are you surprised?
I don't know why. I shouldn't be, right? But I mean, it seemed they got so close to the edge a couple weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, and it was that Calgary Flames game. And the reports were that if they lost that was it. That was a Saturday night on Hockey Night in Canada. And if they lost, he was going to be fired on this Sunday. And to go that so close to the edge and then to come back and they went to the All-Star break, which is only 6 days ago, with all these positive vibes, the 5-0-1 stretch, come back. And in the matter of 24 hours or 26 hours, I guess, the whole thing just falls apart and he's gone. And I mean, I think that's why it surprised me. It's just, if Holland it was that difficult for Holland to dismiss him all this time, for him to just suddenly be pushed there, just like that, this morning was, it just caught me off guard.
Well, I mean, maybe that suggests how volatile things are, right? Like, we're looking at a situation where every loss means as much as 5 wins in a row. Like, that's the reality of what we're dealing with here, right? Because they got 38 games left. If this doesn't turn around, and the Oilers, every time they lose 2 games like this, they're outside of the playoff picture looking in. So they can't afford to have another 5-game stretch where they don't win. And so I'm assuming that's probably what's going on here, was that Tippett had just prolonged his termination long enough to have 2 losses in a row.
It was pretty amazing anyway, right? Because I was thinking about this the last couple of weeks, like, how close is he really on the edge, even though they've kind of seemed to have gotten things back together? Because you just don't see coaches get that close to being fired and then come back and then manage to stick around for a while, right? It just doesn't happen. And yeah. I guess we found that out today.
Well, on that, like, I would just say that, like, I don't think Holland wanted to do it. He's giving him every opportunity to get out of the slump, and he doesn't like to fire people midseason. He said that in the press conference, and, he was trying to avoid the elephant in the room and trying to any way he could to avoid it. And, it just didn't work out that way. And I understand his thinking of it. And I think he did the right thing in giving him the opportunity when the roster was healthy to try and get everything right on track and right the ship. So I commend Holland for that. And I think the timing was right. I think it's been lingering for a long time, and it was a long time coming, and he just had to, this was the straw that broke the camel's back at the end of the day, those last 2 losses. And it kind of shows Tippett's loyalty to Smith. He probably wanted to go back in the net, and kind of backfires on him. And then next thing you know, he's gone.
Well, that was a crazy decision. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I'm curious, Colton, what you think about this. So from what I'm hearing from Julian, what I'm hearing from Brian, is that Tippett was close to the edge, probably getting let go, probably could have been let go during that 7-game, 8-game slide, and then saved his bacon with the Calgary win. Two losses in a row, and that was pretty much it. Holland was like, I got to pull the trigger. on this. I got to make a move I've never made before, which is firing somebody in the middle of the season. Where do you fall on this? Are you surprised like Brian, or are you more like, yeah, this had to get done? Like this was not anything that could have been lingering any longer.
Well, I was kind of thinking before last night's game, if they came out with another effort like they had against Vegas, that I don't know if I thought it was going to happen right then, but I thought, again, he'd definitely be very close to being fired. I just think the first game out of the break against Vegas, they just did not look good at all. And you're hoping they're just flat from having some time off. But then last night in the first period, again, it was the same thing. And I know they ended up playing really well in the second, but it's that same thing we've been talking about this whole time. They just get off to slow starts. And I don't know if that's a coaching thing, because it seems like they've done it in past regimes too, but I don't think I'm surprised. The only thing I'm a bit, I guess, surprised about was just why it didn't happen earlier. Because the fact that it's just 2 games again, if he was that close already, it's like, I don't know. I don't see the harm. I don't know why they wouldn't have just done it before they went on that little win streak there.
It is a little interesting that they didn't do it before the break, but I guess like Brian said, they won a bunch of games. It would have been ideal to have a new coach in there when there was some time off to work with the teams, to talk to them, but then you don't have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. I don't know, man. Like it's just a really interesting situation, because I'm surprised that Tippett made it this far, to be totally honest with you. Like I've questioned a number of his decisions. I liked the Tippett hiring. I've liked him as a coach in the past, and for everybody that's ragging on him today, keep in mind that he got the Oilers into the playoffs for every year he was here, right? He's done a very good job with some pretty, like really high-end star talent, but some depth that was just thrown in there because that's all the Oilers could afford. Like he's done an admirable job. This year, it just backfired on him, right? He's had some things go wrong, and Holland talked about this in his press conference, and we'll talk about this too, but the Oilers goaltending situation is probably on Holland. It's not on Tippett, other than the fact that I was very, very surprised that they went again to Mike Smith. Julian, what were you thinking when Smith played the first game against Vegas? I wouldn't say he played great. And then he gets the call the next night on a back-to-back against Chicago. He's coming off an injury. It seems like if this guy sneezes wrong, he's hurt. And they've put him into the net again, and he lets the first 2 shots in. Not his fault necessarily, because they were wide open shots for Chicago. Yeah. So it's hard to say that was on Mike Smith. But I mean, come on, like, what are you doing? Why would you push this dude? He's 39 years old. He's been injured all year, and you put him in back-to-back situations when you're starting 8 games in 13 days. Why would you do that? He's going to have to play 3 of 4. Were you shocked by that? I was shocked by that.
I was shocked. I was yesterday morning, look at my fantasy team, getting ready to add Stuart Skinner to my roster to put him in my lineup. I held off to see if he was actually going to start because I wasn't sure. And lo and behold, it ended up being Smith going back to back. But I think that was more of Smith wanting, I think they really wanted to get someone in there who's going to get into a groove. And the only way to do that is they've been flip-flopping goalies so often that they haven't had a state, like someone who's given the reins and attempted to go run with it. So I think that was kind of maybe from a coaching perspective, what the idea was. But I also think that Mike Smith went to Tippett and said, listen, like, give me the next one too. Like, I had a bad game against Vegas. I want to redeem myself. And maybe in his history, he feels better when he's able to go consecutively or get into some sort of role where he's, coming into the rink often and working hard and then getting those starts over and over. Cause he's been pretty in and out of it, in and out of the lineup as well. So I think it was kind of a combination of both. So I was still surprised that it actually happened. I don't think Smith technically played very poorly. Because again, there was no goal support and there was some defensive breakdowns that kind of caused the goals. So I don't want to pin it all on the goaltending, but it's a group effort. And unfortunately, because of the inconsistency in the net, it kind of lands on the goalie sometimes.
Some defensive breakdowns would be an understatement.
I'm trying to be a little bit positive.
Yeah, I don't know. Colton, what do you think? Like how much, like Brian's surprised, and I'll come to him with this one too, but how much of the decision to play Mike Smith do you think weighed into Ken Holland's decision to let Tippett go today? Because he said at the press conference that he watched that game in the third period. He kind of knew. He went home. He couldn't sleep. He thought about it all night. In the morning, he woke up and he knew what he had to do. So he called Daryl Cates and he called Bob Nicholson. He said, I got to make a change. But it can't be a coincidence, can it? That this comes on the heel. Because I agree with Julian 100%. I think Mike Smith went to Dave Tippett. And I think where Tippett needs to take some responsibility here is that he's too close to Mike Smith, that they are friends from Arizona, that they know each other extremely well, that he is relying on his goaltender to tell him what he needs. And sometimes you got to pull the player out of their own bad situation. And Tippett was never going to do that with Mike Smith. He's always going to overplay him, right? How much of that do you think weighed into Holland's decision today?
Yeah, I mean, I think a bit for sure. And I think the whole thing with if Smith did go to Tippett and said, put me in, like, if there's any professional athlete that doesn't want to play in a game, like you don't really want them on their team. I think any guy would want to be put back in. So that's up to the coach to realize. Obviously, it's the right decision yesterday to go to Skinner. At the same time, I think Holland deserves some blame here, because if Tippett had a goalie from the get-go that he could be confident in, then maybe he puts him in yesterday. I know Koskinen's on the COVID list, but even if he was around, Smith probably still starts that game yesterday. So I think the firing was right, and I think the decision to start Smith yesterday was baffling, but I think a lot of this still does fall on Holland, just with the goaltending situation and other holes in the roster, that I think Tippett's kind of the fall guy here.
Yeah, well, Holland said today that he takes responsibility. Yep. They asked him how much of this is on the players, how much of this is on the coach. And then Holland's like, you've got to throw me in that group. I'm the one that built this team. So, Brian, I'll come back to you because you were surprised about the coaching change today. How much of this do you put on Holland? Did you put most of this on Holland and not necessarily on Tippett? Where do you lie with that one?
I think there's valid points to both. I'm going to take this on a bit of a tangent, if you'll allow me, though.
Yeah, go for it.
I don't know if you guys caught Tippett's post-game press conference yesterday, but he basically said, he said in no uncertain terms, Smith did come to him and say that he wanted to play. I mean, so I agree with Julian's thoughts that they wanted, they have not had a consistent goalie. They wanted to give it to somebody and get him rolling. I think that was the philosophy. They wanted to hand the baton or give the reins, so to speak, to Smith and just let him go with it and see what happens. But I think this also is an example of a larger problem with Tippett, and it's the culture on this team. Like Colton said, of course, Smith is going to want to play. You know what? I'm sure Stuart Skinner really wanted to play really badly too, right? What professional athlete, what of any of us does, if you're a competitive individual, doesn't want to get out there and play? As the coach, you have to make the right decision. And we've seen this play out across this team in many examples. Let's take a look at like the extended shifts that some players take, right? Like Darnell, there you go. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
We'll talk about the 4-minute shifts from Leon Draisaitl in a minute, I suppose.
That again, like it shows that who's kind of, I don't want to say the inmates running the asylum here, because that would suggest that it's like these guys are,
lost control,
running the show. But it speaks to the culture of this team that there's a lack of leadership, and it's not established, and it's not coming from the top. It's not coming from the coach. And I think that's just part of the problem. It's an example of the larger problem that existed in Dave Tippett's tenure.
I think it's more of a divide, though. Like, I think that it's gone stale. Like, everything he's preached and however far it's taken him, it's gone stale. And we've seen not even just like the NHL in general has gone with starting to be, the recycled coaches aren't working anymore. It only takes you so far. So though they're more of like a reset button, like hit a reset button. Let's clear everything out, establish some sort of rules or I don't even know what the word is, but some sort of base, I guess, to say. And then from that point on, you have to start bringing in some fresh ideas, some new things, creativity. And I think that's kind of, I don't want to get too far ahead, but I think that's what the whole philosophy of bringing in someone who knows the organization in Woodcroft and that young, new type of fresher ideas. And that's, I think, what's going to be beneficial for this team. And we've seen it with the Leafs. They've, from Babcock, very strict and to the point and blunt, to a guy who's allowing the team to play with more creativity and establish their own game, but not letting them get too far out of hand where he's lost control of the team. So I think that's more of a divide.
Let's take a look at the last 24 hours in the NHL. Look at who the Habs brought in. A guy with no head coaching experience anywhere, but he's a player. He understands.
That's not true. He coached under 13 hockey.
Yeah, the brick tournament, right?
Yeah.
But that's it, right? They're bringing in new, younger coaches with fresher perspectives, different perspectives, who aren't that far removed from playing. And that experience of being a player and being able to relate to today's player is much more valuable than Stanley Cups you won 25 years ago behind the bench.
Yep. Yeah. And especially
changing of the guard.
If it's short term too, like we have no idea what St. Louis' future in Montreal is going to be. We have no idea what Woodcroft's future is going going to be in Edmonton. This could be temporary. This could be a few months, and they just need the culture and a pick-me-up in both of those respective locker rooms, right? Colin, I'll ask you this. The Woodcroft hiring, because Jay Woodcroft comes in now. He's from Bakersfield. He's done an admirable job there. They're playing really, really well. Julian brings up the point that you need the culture change, but there's also that familiarity with the system and the Oilers organization. Do you think that's why Glen Gulutzan didn't get a bigger look here? I mean, Holland flat out said no to Mike Babcock. I don't know why even somebody asked that question today, but they did. And he said it was either Gulutzan or Woodcroft, and he goes with the guy who's outside mostly of the Oilers system, but he's in the employ of the Oilers organization. So is that why Woodcroft's in and Gulutzan's not?
So to me, and you guys may disagree, but I think bringing Woodcroft instead of Gulutzan tells me I think they view Woodcroft as potentially a guy that they could hire after this season. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think if Gulutzan takes over in the interim, it tells me that they're looking for another guy in the offseason. I don't think he's really in their long-term plans in that role. But again, like you guys were saying in terms of accountability and everything, I like the hiring. Like Julian said, I like that there's new coaches getting chances instead of just the same old guys. But at the same time, we're talking about maybe leadership in the room and everything and these extended shifts and all that. So if this guy with zero coaching experience at the NHL level or head coaching experience comes in and tells them, like McDavid, Nurse, Draisaitl, whoever you want to say, tells them to like shorten these shifts and kind of work on other bad habits, do they really respect it and listen to him if he hasn't, really had much of a role in the NHL?
I would suggest that they'll do anything to win. That's my take. I think what you're saying has validity. Like, I think they'll go, well, what do you know? But at the same time, they're like, well, we're doing what we think we know isn't working.
But to that point too, I think that means that they fully believe that they can still make the playoffs, which they should, because they still have a good opportunity to do that. And that this hiring shows that it's beyond like they're not writing the season off and hiring someone on the interim and then kind of, because they could have easily brought Gulutzan to just take over as interim and then Woodcroft would be the hire in the offseason and start fresh. But that's not their idea. They want to establish a coach and not have that carousel continue to kind of flow. So I think that's what's important. And this is going to be a tryout still for Woodcroft, even into the offseason. But I think it's important for them to establish the rules and how he wants to run the team and make sure that, that he gets everybody on board in order to do it.
Well, I think
I think the other part of this too that comes to some consideration is the fact that Woodcroft has largely been talked about as one of the leading candidates to get a job this offseason. Like someone was probably going to hire him as a head coach this offseason. I don't know if that factored into this at all. They might have seen that if we don't give him the opportunity now, we're going to lose him in the offseason. So, and by all accounts, this guy, and I believe it too, I think he's going to be a great coach. And maybe they figured, okay, well, we either give him this job now or we lose him, because it's a risky move in the sense that you're really creating the ripple effect throughout the organization, because right now you have such a great situation in Bakersfield. Mm-hmm. Now you're replacing two coaches at once, two coaching staffs at once.
Well, I think Keith Gretzky's going down there or something. Isn't that the deal? Like, because they lose Manson and they lose.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Cruz being switched. He said in the press conference who's going to be taking over there for the rest of the season. His name is escaping me right now, but
yeah. But I get what you're saying, for sure, right? Like, because he said it in the press conference today. He's like, I was fully expecting a month ago that I would be giving Dave Tippett an extension at this point, and then saying either Woodcroft has a supporting role here or he moves on to another organization and flourishes, and we figured that would happen. So he knew if he was keeping Tippett that Woodcroft was probably going like that. Mm-hmm. That's the reality, right? So I'm with you. I want to ask you this though, Brian, because if there's a coach that knows people in it, and to Colin's point, I think some of the people coming from Bakersfield that will play for the Oilers are going to talk up Woodcroft in a major way. So anybody else who's kind of like, well, I don't know, but they're going to be like, no, dude, this guy's awesome. Like, this is why we're winning. This is what. But here's a guy that knows Stuart Skinner better than anybody. Like, he's had him down there in the AHL. He's been killing it since he's been there. What do you think this means for Skinner when you got Woodcroft, probably, who's clearly going to be in his corner?
How much autonomy does he have, I think, is put the big question that, because we know Holland, and he reiterated it in the press conference today, that he wants to go still with the Smith Koskinen tag team.
Well, he doesn't have a choice for 4 games, because they're going to California. They can't take Koskinen with them. If they do, they lose him for another 5 days or whatever it is, quarantine wise. So they're not going to have him for at least the next 2 games. And you got to think that Woodcroft's not putting in Mike Smith.
No way.
You got to think that Smith wouldn't have played last night either, right? But
but it wasn't Woodcroft that made that decision.
Well, I know. Yeah, I get you. But I'm saying it depends on who. I know. I'm sure Woodcroft wants to play him. I'm sure he's going to be in his corner. And I just think it's
unless someone in management rings his phone and says, "Hey, it's still Smitty here." Like,
yeah, exactly.
I think that's the only way that Skinner doesn't start.
Oh no, and I'm not even saying it shouldn't be Smitty. I mean, if he plays like he played last night, he didn't play terrible last night. He played okay. If he's hot, he's great. But what's the option for the backup or the 1B or the whatever? And at the very least, over the next 5 or 6 games, you need to know if it's Skinner or not. Like that's what I'm thinking, right? So
that's what I think too.
Right, and Woodcroft's going to come in, and if anybody's going to give this dude a shot, it's got to be him. Don't you think? He's going to be like, I know what this guy's capable of. I'm going to let him prove it. And if he doesn't, well, then he doesn't, and he'll come up here next year.
And then,
if he can, I'm going to make it very hard for people like Ken Holland to go, well, we're going to put Skinner back down there anyway, because Holland needs wins. Holland absolutely.
He doesn't care where they're coming from or who's getting.
No, because if he doesn't get them, guess who's next?
Yeah.
But if they didn't care where they were coming from, why have they been so stubborn to not give Skinner much of an opportunity all this time?
I firmly believe until now he thought they were going to turn this around, and he thought the guys that he had there, Tippett, Smith, Koskinen, were the guys that were going to do it. And now he's realized he's wrong, right? The Tippett's part of that equation and no more, right? Playfair's gone, right? All those guys that were responsible for like a terrible penalty kill, some questionable line decisions, who's playing what, they're gone. Right. So I think Ken Holland's finally going, oh crap. Like we got 38 games, plenty of time. By the way, they've only lost 2 of those first 8 games in 13. If they win the next 6, they're right near the top of the Western Conference again.
Yeah, they still got games in hand, which is good. And then the next kind of thing to kind of transition to is how, losing Playfair now, we're going to have a new penalty kill, new kind of thing. And it's going to be difficult to kind of establish that because you're missing Keith here. Right. So that's going to be a big role in trying to figure that whole situation out now. So
that's where I was going to go next, actually. Colton, I'll start with you. What's your thoughts on one? Did you see that Duncan Keith going in the boards last night? Jeez, as we record this, we're one day after that, but like that was ugly. I'm glad he's not as bad as it could have been, but he's out 2 to 4 weeks, concussion protocol, and they say some upper body bruises and banging and stuff like that. So he's out. What do you think of that hit? I guess it wasn't a hit so much as it was just.
Yeah, he kind of got tied. He got tied up. It looked like it was scary. Like you said, I think, especially on the replay, like you could tell that he was definitely out for a few seconds. So, I mean, no surprise that he wasn't returning and he'll be out a while. And then I seen Kassian's expected to miss some time too. So
48 weeks, right? Fractured cheek or something?
Fractured jaw.
Yeah.
So I think as far as what you're asking about Keith, I think on the back end, it sounded like they were going to call up Broberg, and I Niemelainen.
He said Marcus Niemelainen's coming for sure.
Yeah.
For both?
Well, I don't know if didn't hear Broberg's name, but it wouldn't shock me because he
could
played
be
fantastic.
I'm not sure.
He played fantastic over the last
So does Legason get the second pair, or is he going with one of his Bakersfield boys on the second pair there?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I was just tossing a hot grenade over there.
Well, who wants to take it first, Colton? You want to take a shot at that? What do you think? What do you think the pairings are going to be?
He knows both those guys. So, I mean, for me, I think Legason kind of is what he is at this point. I think he's about 25 or so. So I'd like to see the younger guy, that Niemelainen, I can't say that name, but I'd like to see him get a shot kind of in the top 4. Just see how he does with it, at least give him a game or 2, and then kind of go from there. But I wouldn't mind seeing him get a bit of a bigger role.
Yeah. What do you think they do now, Brian, when it comes to Zach Kassian? Do they think they have the internal? I mean, this isn't exactly what you want Evander Kane doing, but he's the one guy that can play physical like Kassian was gonna, but hasn't lately. How much do you think it's going to be difficult to replace what Kassian was supposed to be? I say supposed to be because I don't think he was bringing it.
Well, no, that's just it, right? So it's not going to be difficult to replace him because what he was supposed to be, he's not. He is that once every 4 games. So you're really not missing it. You're losing the potential to be that. I don't know if you look at anybody who could be inserted into the lineup in his place and say, okay, he can fill that role. But I mean, yeah, like you say, Kassian wasn't bringing it anyway. So, next man up, let's see somebody else get an opportunity to get some minutes. They might not bring the same dynamic that Kassian is supposed to bring, but you might find something else and find something that clicks.
Yeah, what do you think it's going to take, Julian, for this roster to click? Like, what it's been ugly, but
I
it's been
think
good at times,
there's going to be some sort of residual off of the firing, and everybody kind of
the Boudreaux effect.
Yeah, the Boudreaux effect, we'll call it this year. But I think they're still going to struggle just because of the key pieces they're going to be missing, and it's going to take them a few games to kind of establish like some sort of system again, or implement some sort of system that they want to play, because if Woodcroft is going to be the guy, he's going to have to put his stamp on it and have these guys buy in. So that might take a little bit of time. I think it's good for their whole feeling of the group. So that'll be good. But I also think that this Kassian thing, if he goes on LTIR, that could actually kind of work in their favor heading into the trade deadline, because 6 weeks actually puts them a couple days after the deadline on March 22nd. That gives them a little bit of cap flexibility, I think, if they could put them on an LTIR. So that's a kind of another angle that they could take.
Does it become a cap relief after the trade deadline, or does it only become a cap relief when the playoffs kick in officially?
So it will be when the playoffs kick in. But if he's a piece that is only going to be ready, like that you can afford to lose.
Is his injury enough you can keep him out till the playoffs?
Well, I think that Kucherov won last year. People were saying he was ready to come back beforehand, and they kind of just stashed on there. He might be able to do that.
If they can do that, then you're absolutely right. They save however many millions of bucks that they can,
because he's a guy that could be easily replaced in the lineup and doesn't have that. He's not a polarizing figure in the lineup that you're gonna miss, because not anybody else can kind of give you that firepower. But so if that's an option, I think that guys gives them a lot of play come deadline day, if they can make some sort of move, if they can get rolling.
Okay, I'll ask Brian the same question, then I'll go to Colton. What do you think is required here to get these Oilers? Is this coaching change spark enough?
I don't know. I was thinking before all this went down today and after the game last night, I was thinking like this team could very well miss the playoffs. They seem like a team that was so flawed in the way they're built and so close to falling apart that I could just see this going like almost, I'm not going to say total 2007 post Ryan Smith trade, but I could just see things completely going off a cliff and this team finishing way out of the playoffs. I think this is a very positive move, a great hire. The fact of the matter is he's still working with the same pieces that Tippett had. Woodcroft has now got to find a way to get wins with Smith and Koskinen and Skinner and the depleted defense and lack of depth up front, all the same problems that Tippett had and wasn't able to coax a winner out of. So, it's not going to be easy. I think they can.
I'm curious. I have my take too. I'll get Colin's first and then I'll chime in here. But do you think this roster, so Brian brings up the point, he's got the same roster that Tippett had. Do you think this roster is enough for Woodcroft to do his magic?
I think this roster on paper is as good, if not better than last year, especially up front. But I think the big difference this year, especially lately, is we haven't seen like crazy games from McDavid that we're used to. Like he's, from his standards, struggling lately. So I think that really exposes the flaws. So yeah. I still think that they'll get into the playoffs. I don't know why I think that. I think they're good enough. I think they're better than some of those California teams ahead of them right now. But at the same time, they are nowhere near deep enough to go on any type of playoff run. They don't have the goaltending. I don't think their blue line's good enough. Their bottom six has some holes. So I do think they get in, and I think that Woodcroft will get them there, but I don't expect much from them once the playoffs start.
My curiosity has got me thinking, I wonder what we all talk about Tippett and the job he's doing and the things the Oilers decisions that they make. And we say, oh, it's so obvious they should be doing this. And then he doesn't do them, things like that. My take on Tippett over the last month or two is that he's trying to fix what isn't broken and he can't fix what is. That's how I saw his run here over the last little while. So I wonder, is Jay Woodcroft a guy who's sitting on the sidelines watching Bakersfield and watching the Oilers and go, why wouldn't he do that? You know what I mean? I'm thinking Jesse Puljujarvi playing with McDavid. I'm thinking the pairings and certain just decisions that I could never wrap my head around with Dave Tippett. And I'm like, why would he do that? Why did he make that decision? He's got to have a reason, but I can't figure out what it is. So I'm thinking to myself, if Woodcroft stops making those decisions, maybe some of these things aren't nearly as because you would go out of a win, you'd have a nice big, victory over Washington, the special teams come back, and then the lines would all be different the next game. And you're like, okay, well, what's happening there? Why is he deciding to do that? Why did he pull this guy out of the lineup and put this guy in? And It was a win, like a good, solid win for the team, like just weird stuff. And that was kind of what I was thinking, man, that's going on with Tippett a lot lately. He's either really insecure about his decisions or he's trying to jog something else and he's harming this line over here while he's doing it. And that was driving me crazy. And I just can't see Woodcroft. I mean, every coach is going to have these moments, but I just don't know if Woodcroft does that. I think he goes with some of the obvious things that you got to do to get your early wins as a new head coach. And he says, these guys have chemistry. These guys work great together. This makes a lot of sense to me. Let's try this out and let's stick with it for a minute. And I wonder if that'll make a difference. You know what I mean?
I think that's a great point. I think that's a very valid point.
Yeah. So we'll see. I don't know. I mean, you guys could all be right. All these injuries, COVID stuff, no Koskinen, no Keith, no, could all add up and we'll find out. And I don't get the sense from Holland at that press conference he's doing anything. Like, did you guys get the feeling at all he was going to add anything at the trade deadline? Like he was asked about the goaltending situation. And he shrugged it off almost immediately. Like, yeah, I'm not really going to go the other.
I think he's just keeping it real. Like there's no trades out there. We've been saying this forever and he knows that there's no trades out there too. He's probably trying
he's not even in the position to do it until he sees that these guys are going to start stringing together some wins again. Like how can you give up future, right? Yeah, like how can you give up future assets for question mark when you don't even know how this coach is going to perform yet? So I think the timing is right because you got a good cushion of time here before making a decision closer to the deadline. So they're going to have a couple weeks here to finally kind of deem whether they're going to be buying or selling at the deadline. So it'll be interesting as it unfolds.
Can you imagine if they're selling? Man.
But like, would you not want them to start selling? Like, if,
no,
if they're not going to
I'm
be
just saying,
I know. Like you have playoff aspirations,
and
you have playoff aspirations, and you make all these moves, and you still don't make it. So it's definitely going to be eye opening if they don't make it. But
just think about the poo-poo storm that would come with that. Like we were talking about Devon Shore not long ago, right? That's so far out of the realm of what people would be talking about if the Oilers don't make the playoffs this season. Like, holy moly, we think about that and we go, why would they do that? Why would they sign Devon Shore, blah, 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 blah. And then you're looking at this going like, they didn't even make the playoffs. Like that would be really, really bad. I'm still confident like Holden. I think there's time. 38 games, a big win streak. I think they're good enough
to make it still. I agree.
Yeah, they're a skilled team. They haven't played. I watched that game against Chicago and I just couldn't force passes, no shots. Obvious plays they just chose not to make.
It's very choppy.
It was weird. It was just a weird game to watch, and I just don't know that they'll keep doing that under a different voice. So we'll see. But we could be wrong.
Just to add on what Colton said there about McDavid's lack of production recently, and I don't know if you guys saw. I credit my buddy Tom Gazal at 1260 for this. Is that he said on the ESPN broadcast about how they mentioned he was hurt during the All-Star game.
Yeah.
The ESPN and like if you look at McDavid's numbers over the last close to 25 games, his points per game average, I think was 1.9 something for the first 21 games, and it's 0.9 for the last 22 or 23, however many it is. Like that's no small sample size. That's over more than 2 months. Like to me, that's a real that's an eyebrow raising situation right there. Like I wonder if he's right.
Well, he certainly could be. The narrative fits, but I saw that and then I thought to myself, this is a bigger story and no one else is picking up on it, right? If this is actually an injury, especially if he got it at the All-Star game, and maybe he didn't, maybe he had it earlier and he went into the All-Star. But one, if he's hurt in any remote fashion, why is he playing? Why is he doing the fastest skater competition? If he hurt himself in the fastest skater competition, can you imagine the crap storm that would come out of that? If Connor McDavid hurt himself in an all-star skills competition and couldn't play for the Oilers after that, I mean, that's a huge story, a big problem for the NHL, right?
There is some validity, though, to the fact that he may be hurt, because if you look at the Pacific Division roster, they had one more player than everybody else's. Marchessault was added late, I guess. And the reason for that was apparently, so the rumor goes, is because they weren't sure if McDavid could play. So I don't know. I agree with you though. I mean, yeah, why has no one else picked up on it? Why is he playing? But if that's not the case, then what gives? Why is he struggled like this for so long? Because like Colton said, this is exposing the rest of the team. McDavid had an otherworldly season last year. Dude put up over 100 points in 56 games or 54 games or whatever it was. And that's what it took to get the Oilers where they were. Now he's not producing at that rate, and you see what happens.
He doesn't look slower to me. He just looks like he's forcing it. So does Draisaitl. It looks like they're forcing it. Bouchard forcing it. All these guys are forcing things, right?
Gripping the sticks a little too tight, and that's kind of what comes with everything that's going on.
Yeah, like McDavid can go through 5 people. It doesn't mean he should do it on every play.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's what I'm seeing. I don't know. But
So are they getting the win tomorrow against the Islanders?
I'm glad they're playing the Islanders. Now, normally you say that when they play a lower ranking team, they tend to play down. I let Colton's laughing. That's typically how the Oilers show up for these teams that are not supposed to be as good as them. But I am glad they are playing a team that has not played well for most of the season, because at least they should come into this mentally going, okay, new coach, new perspective, new view of the game, team we should beat. Let's go out here and play. Let's get that first goal. Let's get that second goal. You know what I mean? I'm hoping.
We should ask our show's producer about that.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. All right. Well, thanks, guys. I mean, do you want to take a prediction? Do we want to take
I think we should, or even just a win-loss.
All right. Well, go for it. You go first, Julian.
Oh, man. I don't want to be the downer guy, but I think they're going to lose. I don't know why. I don't know. I'm going with a
way
loss.
To bring up the topic just to punch everyone.
I know. Well, you came to me first.
Oh, so you say you bring up the idea and have you go last. Okay. Brian, what about you? What do you figure?
I'm going to go. Boy, this is a contingent on who starts in goal too. I'll just say 3-1 Oilers.
You don't actually think it's going to be Mike Smith, do you?
Oh, I don't bet on anything. I'm not sure of anything anymore. Nothing surprises me.
I'd be shocked.
Same. I think it's Skinner for sure.
I'd be shocked, but nothing shocks me anymore, I suppose. Okay, Colton, what do you figure?
I think generally, like you guys said with Boudreau, and even when the Oilers brought in Hitchcock a few years ago, I think teams start pretty good under new coaches. So I think they'll win tomorrow. I'll say 4-2.
Yeah, I'm going with an Oilers win.
All right.
It's extremely important that the Oilers win. So I'm gonna
so check the Vegas odds then and see what's going on, and then it'll tell you what's gonna happen.
Yeah, well, they're not that far apart anymore. I'm looking at the record right now. Islanders are 17-17-6, and the Oilers are 23-18-3. So I mean, yes, the Oilers are higher in the standings points wise, but it's not like it was when the season started. The Islanders were just
fingers
awful.
crossed, guys. Fingers crossed.
Hashtag Boudreau effect.
Yeah, let's hope
Let's go.
All right, Julian, Brian, Colton, thank you for everybody else watching. This has been another edition of Oilers Overtime with the Hockey Writers. Check out the YouTube channel for all the other great content. Sign up for the morningskate.io newsletter. We've got lots of stuff on the hockeywriters.com, and we covered a ton of Oilers stuff today and yesterday and probably tomorrow too. So check it out on the hockeywriters.com. Until then, we'll talk to you next week.